a piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer with a title that doubled as a challenge. Quote, as the future of college athletics takes shape, Penn State must speak up, unquote. His argument was that as Congress weighs the Protect College Sports Act, the most serious attempt in years as a national framework for college sports, universities themselves have gone quiet, while conference administrators have positioned themselves as the voice of their own members. His line was blunt. Universities created the conferences. Conferences exist to serve universities, not to control them. My guest today is Chris Bevilacqua. He is a veteran of 4 decades in sports, media, and technology as an entrepreneur, operator, investor, and advisor, including founding the nation's first 24-hour college sports television network, and it's not the Big Ten Network. He is an 86 graduate of Penn State, where he was a 2-time NCAA All-American on the wrestling team and also competed internationally for USA Wrestling. Today, he talks with us about why he thinks the schools have gone silent and what it might cost them. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Karen. Appreciate that very nice intro, too.
Well, let me first ask, did Penn State give you any response or reaction to this op-ed?
I mean, not officially. So, as you might imagine, I, been a Penn Stater for now 45 years since I went to school there. And, I actually have a brother and a sister that live in State College. My brother's in the athletic department. He's a baseball coach there. And my daughter is going to be a future student athlete there. And we were just there this weekend. So I have lots of friends and lots of people that I talk to on a regular basis there, both at the university, and in the surrounding community. So I did not officially hear from the board, but I certainly have talked to a bunch of folks that heard it loud and clear. And I guess, listen, that was the intent. I mean, I know there's lots of politics around all this, going all the way up through the conference office and commissioner and all the staff over the Big Ten. As you correctly point out, the Penn State is a member. It's a member
Yes.
association, a conference that, is represented by a commissioner and the conference staff that is, doing, much of from a centralized standpoint, trying to serve a pretty diverse group of constituents, right? There's now 18 of them. Big markets, small markets, public institutions, private institutions. And, it's really hard on any particular issue to get like unanimous alignment. And so, the commissioners and the conference staff are in a tough position. And, I think that as intercollegiate athletics and higher education has gone through massive change over the last 5-10 years, and it's only accelerating, those jobs and those responsibilities get harder and more complicated.
There's no question. I think, did it depend on the person's position as to how they responded to your op-ed? Was it more like there was a different reaction from coaches and athletic administrators versus senior university officials, even if you had any?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think if you just start at the, at the coaching level, the people that are like in the trenches, on the ground, every single day, dealing with all these issues. I mean, it kind of seems obvious that the system is, in chaos. And, and for somebody like a coach, and of course the athletes themselves and all the people on the staffs that are on the ground dealing with all these issues on a day-to-day basis, like I think it's widely accepted that this is off the rails and we need to do something about it to stabilize it. And, so I think that there definitely was, and it's not just at Penn State. I mean, I've heard this because I'm in the industry going across the country and having these conversations with various athletic departments. And I'd say that when you're on the ground talking to that layer, it is near unanimous that, there needs to be some order and some stability and some predictability put back in the system, which is ultimately what the federal legislation that's working its way through Congress is designed to do. I think when you go up to, the level, the higher level, and you get to trustees and you get to people that have, fiduciary obligations that are trying to think through the impact of legislation and what does this mean for, our university. Like I said earlier, like there's a wide range of membership here that, certain things affect some institutions one way and another, like, these and the issues become complicated when you look across a spectrum like that. So I think it's a little bit, and then at the trustee or the board level, they're a little bit further away from all the things happening on the ground, like coaches and staff that are dealing with. So there's definitely like a little bit of a gap there that, I think is closing, but it's still not directly aligned.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. When you hang out with the people who are in the trenches every single day, they don't know which end is up. And they think that most of the leadership is, not doing enough to get it calmed down. But then you look at the layers of leadership that have to have oversight of athletics. And if you look at the number of layers that don't have any input, it's really just the athletic director, general counsel, and further on up. So even if the Protect College Sports Act produces some miraculous unifying agreement, do you think it's really going to make a difference in the lives of the people who are below the athletics director or doing the daily work?
Well, yeah, meaning if the legislation ultimately passes,
Yeah, yeah.
100%. I mean, I think that, you hear the word chaos used quite a bit these days. I mean, you just saw it, what, 48 hours ago, right? The kid from the Cleveland Browns, okay, who was under contract to play NFL football, just decided, I'm leaving and I'm going back to play for LSU. I mean, he's the first one. I'm sure there's going to be many more.
Right,
Like,
right.
in what world of, of higher education and taking student athletes that are coming out of high school, putting them on rosters, or does this actually make any kind of sense? Where you can now he comes back, this athlete comes back and plays on LSU's roster. He's now kicking somebody off the roster.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
that the system that we all want to work with? And that's just one example. And there's, I'm sure, likely to be many more. It's already happened in basketball a bunch. And so, it's a mess. And it would seem obvious to most that we need to fix that. And so I think this is, among the reasons why this legislation just has to pass, because we have to bring order back to eligibility and how transfers work and how the portals work and how NIL works. And so that it creates, and it's then enforceable. Like it's enforceable under federal law. Like that's different than the NCAA making a ruling and then someone doesn't like the ruling and they go run down to their local judge and they get an injunction or a
Yeah. Right.
TRO. Like
Right. Right.
how many hundreds of times have we gone through that for the last few years? I mean, so that just is not a way to run this system.
So you're advocating you think a federal solution will be helpful in clarifying, not solving, but clarifying some of these key issues. But don't you think it's going to be almost immediately challenged in the courts because of the, fluidity of state laws? I don't think a federal solution is the be all end all in this situation. I think there's still going to be challenges. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I think it seems pretty clear to me in the text that I've read, and I'm not a lawyer,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I do have a Penn State education and I do know how to read. Okay. So I understand plain English. And when it says these, that all of these new provisions, within the legislation, okay, and it's addressing things like eligibility and transfers and NIL and enforcement and state and local preemption on a federal.
Right.
In other
Right.
words, just the things of the bill are being they are preempting state and local. So I suppose anybody can go and file a lawsuit, but it would seem if it's in this bill and it's covered under federal law, you're then you're trying to go and essentially sue the federal government.
Yeah.
So much of those things I would anticipate would get thrown out because it's included in the statute. Now, if there are things beyond that that are getting contested that are in other areas not covered by the bill, I'm sure you'll see more of that stuff. But the things that are causing the most acute issues right now are around eligibility or around transfers, things that happen in and around the portal, and around NIL, right? Using these collectives. I mean, all that stuff goes away and the rules are clear and there'll be enforcement mechanisms that are protected by federal law to do all that. And that, I think, is going to take a lot of pressure off, the stuff that's happening right now.
Yeah, certainly there's a sense that it might bring some order, but it's going to take time to lay all those systems in place and the oversight of those systems. So I know there's a push to hopefully get it signed before this coming year starts, but the coming year started. So I don't
Yeah,
think we're
yeah,
going to get it
listen,
done this year.
we've certainly heard that, but I would tell you that it's much closer than people think. Congress is coming back from recess here. I think the House comes back at the end of the month, and then or first week of September, and then the second week of September, the Senate comes back. So this is all queued up as a for a vote in the Senate at some point here in September. And I think there is broad-based support for it. Again, I've gone around the country and met and spoken with many senators, and I think there's a real recognition that now is the time to act. And so assuming that it goes through the various protocols in first starting in the Senate and then eventually over to the House, it's, certainly possible that it will it'll become law by the end of the year. And then, like to your earlier point, then there will take some time, right, to get everything in order, to get all the systems in place. It won't happen on day one, but we at least have, a stabilizing platform that can then work towards longer term stability.
Yeah, we all would like that. That's for sure. Now I want to bring in your background and current experience as kind of a media tech guy who loves college sports, who's covered college sports. You launched the very first network called CSTV, if any of my listeners remember that, which was the precursor to the Big Ten network, right? And the Mountain West network?
Yep. Well, the mountain came first.
Okay.
The Big Ten came in '07 because we sold the business to CBS in 2006, and the Mountain was started that year because that was part of the agreement that we had with Mountain West to launch a separate network. And then a year after that, the Big Ten started their network. So we were first on both of those. And the network is now called the CBS Sports Network, which is proudly still there and actually has grown quite nicely. Although they are now part of the same challenges that every cable network has these days with cord cutting, and there's just less distribution in the MVPD world, but it's still an important distribution platform for linear cable networks, which is why the Paramount, right, is buying WBD. They're buying, their entire cable portfolio, and that'll be, an important piece of that transaction, assuming it goes through.
Yeah.
We're still trying to get the final approvals for that.
So, for my presidents and trustees who don't have a really good understanding of how much the media landscape has changed, and especially for those who are not at Power Four institutions, how can they use this media, let's say, transition slash disruption to benefit their schools right now and drive the kinds of things that they're interested in? Awareness, retention, earned media, celebration. Those are things that matter to presidents.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at it in kind of two different pieces. The first piece is, as it relates to media, that is where is all the consumption going? Like, where is all the engagement? Like, who's providing the content that people are watching? And I think most would agree that that's kind of the Division One, Power Four, Group of Six. There's a market for all that, right? And not surprisingly, the Power Two, meaning the Big Ten and the SEC, have the lion's share of all that consumption and engagement in media. And then you go down the chain to the ACC and the Big 12, and then the Group of Five, and that's the basket of content that most people are watching in media, with again the vast majority of that being in the top 2 to 4 leagues. Then you look on the other side and you have, I guess said another way, like Division 2, Division 3, all the other university athletics and content and those, they don't get a lot of distribution and a lot of engagement through the traditional media platforms, right? So, and if I were a president or athletic director in that that second market, if you will, that's a different kind of a media property. And it's probably, those are more, I would think, susceptible to, the non-traditional media platforms. So things like streaming and things like social media and things like, platforms where there are engagement, that serve, I would say, like more niche oriented audiences. And there's probably not, there's more, like, I think you have to think of it as a, like a connectivity play, where, in other words, like if you have a smaller, more niche university and athletic offering, that you're talking directly to your potential customers who are looking at that type of an experience. And for you know a collegiate experience, both as a student and as a student athlete. And because it's much cheaper and less expensive to create content and engagement content, in those distribution channels, than it is on a more, broad-based distribution channel, like whether it's broadcast television, linear cable television, or in some of the bigger digital distributors like Amazon and Google, which now, I mean, a lot of them, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and who am I missing? Amazon, Netflix, Google, and
YouTube? No, well, Google's YouTube.
no, Apple. So
Okay.
well,
Yeah.
of the four, there's a real flight towards the premium stuff, which is what I was alluding to earlier with the Power Four and G6, on the sports side. But I think that, like, you just have to be realistic about which side of the equation you're on, right? If
Right.
you're a president or an athletic director, and model it from there.
I think a lot about these schools, the G5, the next grouping, D2, D3, how they can use this technology to their advantage to promote their schools, to promote their teams, promote their athletes. Do you have any recommendations for strategies that sports information departments and others can do with the video that they collect?
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely the short, kind of bite-sized content that you see quite often, in social media and, YouTube, and, it's just a way to use as connectivity and telling stories, and using. We've become like a real video-centric population. We like short form stuff, and we like to be entertained. We like to, my kids, I got 4 kids. I see them constantly on this thing going like
Yes,
this, like, so, but that's where you got to fish where the fish are, right? So
that's
that's
right.
where all that's where all the fish are, in a certain demographic. And, that's only going to grow over time.
I couldn't agree more. I wrote a chapter on media as infrastructure, not as an option, in the book that I have, Understanding College Athletics, because I think that's their lifeblood for getting the word out about their school. People don't read newspapers, in hard copy anymore. They don't read brochures. They just scroll. And so how do you get your content there? And how do you prioritize the content that you're using that says the right message that you want your school to know about? Any thoughts on how do you do that in terms of content quality, content topic, those kinds of things?
Well, I think that, people love stories.
I know. I know.
So, if there are, and you see this a lot, I mean, kind of the Olympics on television kind of perfected this model, right? Which, they show up every 4 years, and, for the year leading up to the 17 days of the Olympic competition, in this case, NBC, who's had the Olympics for the last, whatever, 20 or 30 years, they'll start seeding the audience with, these are athletes they didn't know 12 months ago,
That's right.
and they start telling their stories, and they create this kind of whole story arc that starts with the introduction, and it shows, look at the hardship that this athlete has suffered through, or these are the things that has happened in his or her life. And then it leads you all the way through until you get to the actual competition. So they really like, so I think telling stories with the personalities around your athletes, and using that as, I call like the tip of the spear to, get people interested, because, if athlete XYZ is going to Middlebury College and they're playing lacrosse, and they come from this family and they have this amazing story to tell, like like getting that out there, like, and getting it in front of the right audience in a format that that audience likes consuming is a great place to start. And like I said, it's not that expensive to do that, you know, in with video and social platforms and YouTube and you know, like the one main change in media that we're rapidly in the middle of and it's accelerating is we're going from what used to be a mass media platform, right? You put on a live event on ABC, NBC, CBS. This is back when I was starting my career, and there was only a few places you could watch it
Yeah.
to now we went from mass to personal. So we're in a world of hyper personalization and sports storytelling is, like I said earlier, like the tip of the spear to create these hyper personalized products, media products. So like I now live in a world where you know, Amazon and Netflix and, you know, Hulu and all these services I have, they know who I am. They know I live in Larchmont. I have 4 kids. I bought a Chevy Suburban. You know, they have all this information on me.
Right.
And they
Right.
know I love the New York Yankees and they know I love the, you know, the New York Giants. And so I get served like, you know, I can sort of customize my experience in media.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that, you know, through the aperture of sports. Obviously, there's other things I do in life, and that I get stuff served at me. And so we are in the middle of this transition in, you know, from a wholesale model into a retail model. Retail being direct to consumer, and I'm only getting what I want when I want on whatever device I want in real time. And technology is driving that. And, you know, now you have all these services that are ubiquitous, right? Like Amazon Prime has over 120
Yeah.
million members and Netflix has got 80 million. Globally, they've got hundreds of millions. And so, and sports is essentially a marketing and customer acquisition tool for these
It
direct
is.
consumer platforms that go far beyond the media business, right? So you know, I think there's a real opportunity. You go back to if I'm a president or an athletic director across college sports, like how can I use my IP? Like how can Penn State in this new world use the Penn State brand and Penn State athletics because they sell $10 billion a year of higher education services.
True.
And sports is like $300 million of a $10 billion a year budget, but it's their marketing to sell the 10 billion. So how can I keep accelerating? How can I keep building on that? And that's sort of my argument. That's why it goes back to the op-ed, which is this, you know, one of the most important assets a university has, besides their physical footprint, like all the amazing real estate there is in state colleges and all these wonderful buildings and all these research grants they get from the federal government and the state of Pennsylvania to, you know, invent new things that eventually Penn State can take ownership of, right? Is, you know, like how do we use our athletics positioning, our athletics IP to drive our business?
Right.
And that's like no disrespect to the president or the athletic director, like because they're on the ground and they're like fighting quarter to quarter, right? They have to like show results every quarter, which, you know, like you're being like if you were running a company, right? A publicly traded company, you got to like perform and you're getting measured in short term. Whereas the things that we're talking about here are, these are multi-generational decisions. Like, should we support this or that? Because if there's federal legislation and it's going to set the stage for the next 100 years, that's a decision that fiduciaries have to make. People
For
that
sure.
are
For
sitting on
sure.
boards should be making, not like
Right.
management. Like that's just the difference. So you're talking about these hugely important decisions, you know, and you're asking the right questions. Like if I was a president of that, like, how would I be looking at this? Well, there are certain things that you have to do on a day-to-day and a quarter-to-quarter basis, but then what's best for the long term? So like in the case of Penn State, like there's a world where, you know, we're talking about like how much is Fox and ESPN going to pay for Big Ten rights
Hmm.
when that's not the right question. The right question is, what is it worth to ChatGPT and Anthropic? Because someday, right, that's the discovery layer to how you get to information and content. So they're going to be the ones that are buying this stuff in 5 or 10 years, not Fox and ESPN. They may still be a part of it, but that whole dynamic is going to change.
Chris, I'm so glad you got to that point because that really gets to the point of our conversation, which is your intellectual property and your ability to get eyeballs so you can track data and accrue data so that you can then leverage them to another space. So again, I'm a small college president who for years has been pushing to get my games on streaming services like Flow Sports or something like that. And that's been the focus of my coaches. But if I'm a next level president, I really might be thinking about these smaller niche videos that attract more eyeballs and collect more data, because likely the whole game is being watched by the parents only versus the small kinds of things. Might I think about recreating my communication staff so that they're better at doing that to try to catch those eyeballs?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you go down and you go to the bucket that's below the Division 1 and you get into 2 and 3, right, where your point about the data and first party data and data collection, because all this data that's getting collected, is what's fueling and powering all these technological developments, which is also obviously being used to drive engagement and viewership, in the media world. And that's what I was saying earlier about personalization. So yes, if I were in that, genre, I would be looking as like, how can I use my IP, use my athlete, talk to the audience I know that's it's smaller audience. So there's no like immediate pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but you're collecting data and you're creating value because ultimately you're getting people that have interest in your program or IP. And again, while it's a smaller audience, it's actually an audience that if you are able to build out, because albeit it's small, but there's nothing to say that it's going to stay static like that. You want to grow that audience and grow that pie over time. And I think it starts with, you make a really good point about collecting data and having a focus on doing that. So you might reorient your staffing to those types of needs.
Yeah, I think so much, used to rely on brochures, mailing brochures, having, you know, uh, college days on different campuses, getting them to come to campus. That's great, but that's hard. You can reach hundreds of thousands of people if you have the right data who have shown an interest in your type of school and therefore might be more drawn to the images that you're putting on TikTok or Instagram,
Yes,
those
yes.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where your future customer base is. So you should be there. You should really over index that way, 100%.
So as we wrap this up, do you have advice for presidents, trustees about where this space is going? You talked a lot about data. You talked a lot about IP. What recommendations might you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, we're heading towards, and any of your audience will know, like this enrollment cliff.
We're
And
there. We're there.
you're there, and I think marketing and data collection in this environment is going to be even more critical because it's supply and demand. Like we've sort of overbuilt the system, so to speak. With I was the end of the baby boom, right? I was like at the very tail end of the baby boom. So enrollment has only gone down, and now college education has gotten so expensive because we've built this massive infrastructure. You got to pay for it even though there's less people using it.
That's right.
And then you now have, you have AI as an example, disrupting the flow of education. Some will argue that, well, AI helps. I don't know, like I have to struggle to keep my kids off of, chat GPT and asking, like critical thinking is a really important thing in an educational journey. And it can't be, if I don't understand something, I ask chat GPT, I get the answer. You got to understand why you're getting the answer. And so you have to, so I think we're just in an era of disruption here that I think we have to, if I'm a university president, I'm bringing it back to like who I am, what it is that I offer, why paying $90,000 a year to this university is a good investment, and and really selling that and offering to the value behind that.
Yeah, that's exactly how presidents are thinking right now. The challenge is we've complicated it with NIL and the transfer portal.
Well, yeah, in athletics, that's the case. Yes. Yeah. let's not forget that it is a higher education learning experience,
Thank
and
you.
athletics
Thank you.
is a part of that experience, right?
That's
Because
right.
you learn leadership and you learn, setting goals and you learn how to work hard. I mean, and obviously athletes over index on graduation rates and on success in life, which is why we have to do everything we can to preserve this system.
Could not agree more, Chris. Thank you so much for spending some time with my listeners, with me, to talk about this fast changing space and to try to help them understand some of the benefits if they shift their focus a little bit more.
Great to be here with you, Karen. I appreciate the platform.
Thank you.